Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. We've got Rachelle Morris with us today, candidate for Salt Lake County Council at large seat. And we've got our own House District 60, Tyler Clancy, the youngest member of the Utah legislature.
Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, it's nice to have both of you together. I mean, this is epic.
Well, we've been friends for a couple of years now.
Have you?
So
you're bringing in the troops here, right?
Oh yeah.
We just had to supercharge this podcast and really make it memorable. So.
Yeah. So that's great. Yeah. So tell me, let's talk about your race for a second. I mean, people don't realize that Salt Lake County at-large seat, that's bigger than a congressional district.
Yes.
Right?
So Congressman John Curtis, he's endorsed me, but when we were catching up about a month ago, he goes, "Wait, 1.2 million people? This is 1.5 times the size of a congressional race." He goes, "All right, this is a big race. This is a big deal. Rachelle, we got to get you across the finish line here."
That's cool.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good. And you know, I've noticed lately that there are some pretty important people on the Democrat side that have crossed the aisle to endorse you in this race.
It means a lot. Councilwoman Ann Granado, who has been the District 4 council member on the Salt Lake County Council for about 6 years now, Democrat, old school Democrat. She cares about public service over politics, and she has been evaluating our race all year. And over the weekend, she goes, "Rachelle, I'm ready to endorse you." Oh. And I said, let's get together ASAP. So we got to announce that this week. I have the entire Republican caucus's endorsement too. So, you know, we're talking Amy Winder-Newton, Sheldon Stewart, Dave Alvord, Laurie Stringham, Dee Theodore, and now Ann Granado too.
Oh, very good. So yes. Most of the council.
6-3.
Yeah, that's something.
With one abstaining. And the one is Jim Bradley, who's retired.
And you know what? Yeah. Here we got Clancy here today.
I know.
And he's like, this guy is, you know, I mean, he's a pro-Trump guy, but the Democrats love him, right? How do you pull that off?
I think it really just gets back to what Rachelle said of just that public service. You know, across the board, I think people are hungry for just someone who's going to get down and do the work of making our community better. And that's what we try to do, I think, at the legislature, and we take that job very seriously.
Well, and I think why Tyler and I have become friends over the last couple of years is because we're willing to look at issues that often have been labeled as Democrat issues or right. Democrat topics to
right.
think about. But
well, and you know, you think about this county council. I mean, I know we run a partisan election there, but local issues are much different than statewide or national issues, right? Because this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where things happen, right? And the issues are somewhat nonpartisan, really, when it comes right down to it, right?
You're talking rec centers, you're talking parks and trails. The largest line item in the county budget is the criminal justice system, the jail, right? Our sheriff's department and all the specialty law enforcement agencies inside of Salt Lake County. These are highly specialized law enforcement officers. We got to take good care of them. It's not.
Well, this is where Representative Clancy really shines, yes. Isn't it?
Well, no, and Rachelle said it best. You know, one of the things I think we've seen trending here in the state of Utah is kind of the uptick in gang activity. The Metro Gang Unit is another one that falls under the purview of the county. It's important that we have someone who understands why it's important to have law enforcement's back, why it's important to build on that foundation of community policing, the positive outreach, building those relationships so that when crises do happen, we have that trust built in.
Yeah, I'm honored. The Salt Lake Valley Law Enforcement Association has endorsed me. They'll endorse candidates from either party. This is about who is the candidate who they believe will be a collaborative leader representing the civilian community and engaging with law enforcement in productive ways and having law enforcement's back.
Yeah.
And this Metro Gang Unit, I've gotten to know some folks who work in it. this is tough work that they're doing to keep Salt Lake County safe.
Yeah, and you know, the influx over the border. I mean, we've gotten a lot of kind of shady people coming, and not saying that everybody is, right?
Certainly,
but there's this one element, especially with the gang activity, where we're
yeah, and I think that you criminal justice is one of those issues that has become partisan, but really when you look at it, there's a big overlap. People understand that the vast majority of people who are in Utah are not criminals, are not that criminal element. But for that small percentage, we want to make sure that there's interventions that work. We want to make sure that we can get ahead of it, whether it's through strong education, strong employment, but also on the back end, making sure that repeat violent offenders are held accountable so they're not going out there and re-victimizing people across the state.
Yeah, and I assume Salt Lake County, that's...
Well, I just drove up
huge...
here from Fair Park, which is on the west side of Salt Lake County. I've spent a lot of time on the west side. And look, every time I get to know community members of Fair Park, Rose Park, Poplar Grove, Glendale neighborhoods, they all plead for the same thing, which is increase enforcement on their side. They're the ones who are the most impacted by these issues that you're bringing up. The fentanyl that's on the streets. You drive
that's
down
a huge
North
problem,
Temple.
right?
Huge problem.
Do you see that in law enforcement?
Absolutely. We've seen a massive shift from heroin, which was kind of the opiate du jour for individuals in kind of the drug game, and now that's fentanyl has really taken over. The sad part about fentanyl is obviously the criminal side of it, the violence that it brings about the drug trade, but you don't see long-term fentanyl users anymore. It's just not going to happen. If you have these young people who get addicted early on to fentanyl, it's so dangerous, they're not going to live 10, 12, 15 years. It's only a matter of time before we see those overdoses. So it's important to get at the heart of the issue and really combat that in our communities.
Well, you know, that seems to be a problem where it's almost like an organized effort on the part of the Chinese government to push that. And it isn't safe at all.
No, and I'll tell you, the Chinese government has really flooded the drug market, specifically with the chemicals that it takes to create the fentanyl. It's being made all over the place, whether it's in South America or here in the United States. But the Chinese Communist Party has clearly made an effort to flood our communities with this dangerous poison that's taking the life of our young people and cutting so many lives short. That could be really incredible.
Yeah, it's sad. Right.
Yeah.
And you happen to represent a county that you've got these issues, right? Salt Lake County, is kind of right in the middle of, I mean, you have some of the wealthiest areas in the state, but yet you also have some of the poorest areas in the state, right?
Well, and that's why I'm running to represent all 1.2 million people who call Salt Lake County home. And wow, what an experience it's been. I launched my campaign January 2nd. Folks talk about the ebbs and flows of a campaign, and I go, no, we turn the treadmill on a push pace, and I have been pushing it all year, spending time across all 23 cities in the county. And you're right. I get to know a lot of individuals who have told me as I've been knocking doors, and they say, a countywide candidate has never knocked on my door. And I don't want to start listing off cities because I don't want them to be classified as, second tier cities. But I know these cities, I know people in the cities now, and I have committed to them that I will represent them at the county level. They need to have an advocate, they need to have a voice, and they need to have someone who is acutely aware with their issues, whether it's housing, whether it's public safety. I was knocking doors this Saturday morning, and some folks told me about how, They've noticed that unsheltered individuals in our community, in our county, have now started camping out closer and closer to their neighborhood over the last year, and they're getting scared, right? And so that's when we talk about the public safety bond that's on the ballot, the need to expand the jail, talking about the Justice and Accountability Center. And I think when you talk with residents about these issues and explain why we need to invest in our criminal justice system, then they get on board with it. But it takes a dual-pronged effort of investing in building out the jail, which is an expensive project that we'll be undertaking over the next several years. Also putting in accountability frameworks and mechanisms to make sure that the money that is being invested in our criminal justice system by taxpayers, it's not being invested by me personally above and beyond the property taxes I pay, that we are moving the needle on homelessness over the next 5 years. And that's where Representative Clancy is definitely a leader at the state level.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Senator Johnson helped with House Bill 298 last year, which started to put in place some mechanisms, some framework of how do we measure success. You know, one of my political role models, Jack Kemp, former Congressman Jack Kemp, who was also a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
He had a quote that I loved, and he said, you know, success is not just measuring how many people we help, but success is how many people don't need help anymore after they've moved through the system.
Oh. Right.
That's the kind of thinking that whether it's at the county level, the state level, even at the municipal level, that I think folks are hungry for. Not just good feelings, not just how many socks or blankets do we give out, although that's important, but how many people are we truly helping to change their lives and flow through the system that we've invested millions of dollars in.
Yeah. We're going to take a break, and we'll come right back.
Hi, I'm Rachelle Morris. As I've campaigned across the valley, I've learned Salt Lake County residents have a lot in common. We want our tax dollars managed wisely, we want safe parks and neighborhoods, and we want to ensure that this is a great place to live for many generations. When you elect me to the County Council, I'll get right to work solving our biggest issues so that together we can make Salt Lake County work better for all of us. I'm Rachelle Morris, and I approve this message.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. Of course, we got Tyler Clancy here from the House, and Rachelle Morris, at-large County Council, Salt Lake County Council. Great to have both of you. I mean, we've had kind of a robust discussion in terms of, you know, poverty, policing. What would you say, Rachelle? Because you're out there knocking doors every day, right? What would you say are the major issues that people have?
Yeah, well, we'll just start listing them off. Cost of living, housing affordability, supply of housing, lack of supply there, homelessness, and just overall public safety. People genuinely want public spaces returned to the public. And not individuals who are, you know, unsheltered for various reasons, right? There's been trauma in their lives, and they have found themselves to be homeless. I actually think that the state has done a good job of making sure that we're triaging these cases.
Right.
And then
temporary homelessness. I mean, I think we've done a pretty good job of getting those people back. Right.
We are triaging this. We do not want folks to be unsheltered who do not want to be on the streets. And then we have individuals who are dealing with drug addiction issues and mental health. Yeah. And the county does oversee mental health resources for Salt Lake County residents. That is the level of government that has that mandate. And, you know, I'm really excited about the Huntsman Mental Health Foundation's work that's going on in the county, and the Kempsey and Carolyn Gardner Mental Health Crisis Care Center that is going to be opened next year. It's right across the street from our Metro jail in the county, and I think that there will be a lot of synergies with our criminal justice system with the placement of that center. And one that I'm sure Tyler can chime in on this is, as I've been meeting with law enforcement officers over the year, so many bring up their own mental health and the tolls of their work on their own mental health. And when I toured this crisis care center that's going to be open next year, the architect talked about the design of the facility where law enforcement officers will be able to bring in someone who's needing urgent care for a mental health episode, but then also they can discreetly meet with a mental health care provider too.
Right.
And it's discreet, and there's a lot of dignity for any and all patients who will be coming to this facility.
Yeah, that's very good. You probably see a lot of this.
Certainly. I mean, it really hits you home what Rachelle described as kind of this idea of secondary trauma where it's the same as an ER doctor.
Right.
You see so much happen during the day that it kind of sticks with you. You kind of put those bricks in your backpack per se. But I'll tell you that that key group that we describe, the individuals dealing with deep drug addiction, deep mental illness, those are the ones that, as a police officer, that's why you want to go and become a cop. You want to help those people move on and change and get into the resources that they need. One of the things, too, that I appreciated Rachelle's support on, and you as well, Senator Johnson, was House Bill 299 last year. In San Francisco, where there has been a real, I think, cluster of that chaos and kind of the street living, there have been times where the first responders, whether it be an EMT or a police officer or even a social worker, wants to bring that person in because they're so at a crisis point that they're not able to manage their physical safety. That's what we call in Utah a pink sheet. What we've been able to do now is move it from 24 to 72 hours to give them that availability. It doesn't mean it has to be 72 hours to be held, but it gives the doctors the flexibility to make sure that we get resources. Is that a Republican idea? Is that a Democrat idea? I don't know.
Or
that's
why
human
dignity.
Well, that's why
know?
That's why it's so important to have you involved at the legislature, because you see these things on a daily basis. You understand what's going on, and I like your comment though, because services closest to the people are what we really want. I know you and I are big fans of local control and moving the decision making closest to the problem makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
A lot of sense. And I think that's too where I think there's a big disconnect right now between the national policy when it comes to homelessness and really what we're trying to do in Utah. The national policy is simply one solution: housing, housing, housing. We need to get someone housing. Well, if you talk to people who have been on the streets for 10, 12 years, they've had housing 20, 30, 40 times. But if someone's dealing with a severe meth addiction, a severe case of bipolar schizophrenia, getting four walls around you is only part of the issue. That doesn't mean housing is not a puzzle piece, but in Utah, I think we're really zeroing in, Republicans and Democrats, on that whole person model, making sure that we have those common sense solutions at the fingertips of who is, as Rachelle said, triaging these brothers and sisters in our community that are struggling.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, the closer you get to the people, the less your partisanship matters. Right.
Amen to that.
And I think that's an important point. I mean, we get so tied up on, oh, well, this person's running for city council and they voted for Trump, so I can't vote for him. It's kind of like, what the crud, right?
Yeah. I am running to represent the entire county, and I'm even running to represent those who choose to vote for my opponent.
Right.
And it is so critical. I so appreciate Arthur Brooks's work on bridge building. I feel like I am a student of his, and it is.
Isn't that great having him at the University of Utah?
Oh, wow.
Well, and he was in town about a month ago, and I got to see him speak twice in the same day, which was great because it reinforced some of the principles that he talked about. But he said, do not let the divisiveness of national politics get in the way of community building and civic service and engagement at the local level. And wow, what a motivator that is for
me. And I think we miss that, right? Don't you? I mean, these things may make more difference at the state level or nationally. Mm-hmm. Right, because of the difference in direction people might have in what they feel is the right policy. But as we get close to the people, the the decision making really rotates around this idea of what's in the best interest of the citizens of Salt Lake County.
Well,
right?
and I think it's critical too that look, homelessness is an issue where it's uncomfortable to talk about, it's uncomfortable to think about, and it has grown in Utah over the last decade, and it's very easy for people in different levels of government to point the finger at another level of government and say, well, that was their fault. Right. And I really do believe that Utah is starting to turn a corner here over the last year, saying, check the egos at the door, whether you're at a municipal level, county level, state level, federal level, whether you come from nonprofit sector, the public sector, private sector. We just got to work on this together to move the needle.
Well, and one of the things I appreciate about you in your discussions is that you're also willing to take on this issue of, let's face it, Salt Lake County is a bunch of cities, right? Certainly. And there's not a lot of unincorporated Salt Lake County.
About 10,000 residents
right?
left out of 1.2 million.
Yeah, and so now you start to. I mean, you've talked about the overlap of services. Mm-hmm. You've talked about where we spend our money as a county. And I think you're narrowing in on these issues. Homelessness, right? That's something the county can actually have a lot of influence over, right? But some of these services that actually are at the city, it's the same local control issue, right? Where do we make the decisions closest to the people, right? And I've appreciated, Rachelle, that you've been willing to have those conversations.
And I think too, it's not just having the conversations, but building those relationships. We're seeing in Florida right now some serious natural disasters. All of those cities, all of those counties, they want to be able to pick up the phone and be able to coordinate resources. That's when those relationships are tested. What's really impressed me about Rachelle is building those relationships with, I don't know how many mayors have endorsed you, I've lost count. But being able to, in a time of crisis, in a time where it's really important, it's 2 a.m. and there's a decision to be made the next morning, that someone can count on their county councilor to pick up the phone and they'll answer and have a productive dialogue, regardless of the issue. Those are the things you can't really quantify, in a typical political spectrum. But those are the things that really count when it comes down to it.
Well, thank you. That means a lot, and I think I learned it from my parents. My parents are just like so many everyday Utahns, and they show up. And I lived in Houston for many years, and we'd have tropical storms and hurricanes, and my father was like, he was in charge of emergency response for our local church community. He got ham radio certified. I mean, he took this responsibility with a lot of care and diligence in good times. And then a crisis would happen, and my dad was ready, and our local church community was ready to serve our broader community because of that preparation, all of that legwork, all of that relationship building ahead of time. And I'm grateful to my dad that he showed me how to do this.
Well, another area too, I think, where Rachelle shines is this idea of, finance and understanding budgets and understanding how numbers go together, right? That type of expertise, I think, is valuable.
And Senator, you and I are very aligned on this issue, both being, very aligned with the Utah Taxpayers Association. There's many times where you have to say no more than you say yes.
Right.
It reminds me of that quote. It's wise men and women plant trees that they'll never sit in the shade of. To me, being a fiscal conservative is really that principle. Understanding that while now we may have the funding or the good times to maybe put us a little bit over on the teetering on the edge, or putting our toes, on the edge of the mountain, if you will. But understanding that the economy is cyclical. Talking to former Speaker Greg Hughes about when the recession happened, when there had to be services pared back. That's really painful. Making sure that we have individuals, leaders like Rachelle, who can be there to captain the ship, to really put in place the framework that's not just going to be the next 4 years, but the next 10 and 20 years down the road for a fiscally responsible future.
Well, and you know, I just did a survey of my region, you know, some polling, you know, which you do when you're running for office, right? And it didn't surprise me that the number one issue was taxes. And the number one tax that people hate is property tax.
Oh, they hate property taxes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, part of fiscal responsibility is we can't just continue to spend, right? I mean, people are getting tired of their taxes being increased, especially people that are on fixed incomes. And so, you know, being able to look seriously at, well, part of the problems with taxes is maybe we're spending too much.
I think there's two pieces of the puzzle there. The spending too much, to me, I think that's self-evident to a lot of folks across the state. But the second piece is reforming the programs that we do have. I'm a believer that if there was a number, if there was a silver bullet, we say, you know, if we paid XYZ in taxes, we could solve this problem. But the issue is, and we've all been there at the table when this has happened, we're told these stories, we're told, you know, at this rate, we can solve this problem. And that rate is, you know, taken care of, and the problem persists or increases. And there's more and more and more, and the problem sustains. I really think that as conservatives, our clarion call, if you will, is to go into these programs and let's figure out what works. Let's help that, you know, I really think it's a really important stewardship that we have if we are making decisions based on people's, you know, taxpayer dollars. Every single dollar that comes out of someone's paycheck, that is sweat. That is sweat equity that they worked. We should not take that for granted. And that's really why I think it's so important that even not just curtailing the spending, but making sure the spending that we do have actually works. That's important.
Well, and I'll say that the county government, every county government employee I've talked to this year, they want to affect good change. That's why they're working in the position they're working in, right? So how do we continue to modernize county operations, incorporate new technologies, do things to help it run more efficiently, more smoothly, and affect positive change in our community for the 1.2 million investors in Salt Lake County, who are all the residents who pay all the property taxes.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Well, we're out of time. Why?
No, don't say that. Senator.
Okay, so why don't you make a final pitch to voters?
Thank you for spending time with me again today. It really has been an honor to run for office in a countywide position all year. Whether you live in Magna or Mill Creek or Sandy or Salt Lake City or Harriman or South Jordan or West Jordan, I have loved, or any other of the cities in Salt Lake County, I have loved getting to know you, getting to know your family, getting to know your communities. I will show up as a public servant for you. I will earnestly serve the good people of Salt Lake County. I hope that you will vote for me over the coming weeks. It would be my honor to serve you.
Very good. Thank you.
Said it better.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. It's a pleasure to have you.
He's running unopposed, so he doesn't have to do a final pitch. But
Very good. We'll see you guys next week.